Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Happy to see you. Our director of Tushita is here joining us this morning, and her name is Pema Wangmo. She's Tibetan, and she grew up here in India, but was born in Tibet, and we're so lucky to have her as our leader here at Tushita, and she would like to say a few words.
Hi. Is it okay? Hello. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, please. Allow me to take a few minutes from you. So I'm here actually want to thank to all the donors who who gave generous amount of donation for past, I think, more than 2 weeks. Thank you so much for all your donations. And here again, I want to request you all to make as much as donation as possible because because of the lockdown, Tushita is also locked down and we don't have much, we don't have actually any income coming in, but we still have expenses like paying for our local staffs and paying electricity bills, water bills, and then we have few people staying here with us now, so we have to feed them. So we do have expenses even though we are closed. So I want to request all of you to make as much as donation. No amount is big or small, but please, any kind of donation will help us to run the center and also for us to keep running this particular online session as far as possible. So please, please, please make donations. Thank you. Enjoy your sessions. Thank you so much.
Okay, so as usual, let's start our meditation. So set up your posture. And as soon as you get settled, notice how your body relaxes and your awareness moves away from your head. So set a positive motivation. A strong intention of why you're doing this activity. And then you can take 3 deep breaths. And each time you exhale, settling deeper into a meditative state. Letting go of any tension and bringing awareness to the sensations of the breath at your nostrils. So we're narrowing the focus, becoming more intense about watching the breath. And then shift your awareness from the breath to the mind that is aware of the breath. So that clear, bright, still awareness that exists in the mind, that is the mind observing. That is always present in the background, and open that awareness up. So the object of our focus now becomes the space of the mind. The breath is still present, of course, but now it's in the background. And what is in the foreground is that subject, the subjective view, the mind that is observing. And notice the stillness of that awareness, like a mountain. Any activities can occur on the mountain, but the mountain doesn't move and is always present. And if thoughts start to carry you away, thinking about other things, just let them go. Let them pop like flimsy water bubbles that just float away and disappear. And open up your awareness so the space becomes more and the content becomes less. And then start to come out of the meditation slowly. Okay, so let's do some review. Felipe, I think you need to spotlight me again. Thank you. Okay. So looking at reviewing the causes of suffering that we talked about yesterday, this process that leads to the experience of suffering in our lives, we have the ignorance that sees things dualistically as somehow existing out there, separate from the perceiving mind. And when we have that perception of things as being out there, then when a feeling, we contact an object that we believe is separate, a feeling arises in us of positive, negative, or neutral. And then we have the misperception that because that process happens so fast, both the ignorance and the feeling, that the feeling is actually in the thing. Okay, so if I see a beautiful flower, I get a positive feeling from it because I think it's beautiful. I have the belief that the good feeling is in the flower instead of recognizing that it's something that arose in my mind. And that's the misperception. And that misperception leads to afflictive emotions such as attachment or anger, including pride and jealousy. And those afflictive emotions lead us to do harmful actions. So we steal, we obsess, we get jealous, we hurt others, we push others away, we reject them, based coming from these afflictive emotions that develop in response to our misperceptions about how things exist. And so if we want to counteract that, okay, we looked at if we have already created a negative action, okay, and we don't want the suffering, we interrupted that cycle with purification. Okay, so that's the purification that we did when we talked about the karma. That's how we stop the suffering if we've already done a harmful action. Now, if an afflictive emotion has arisen, okay, we can become aware of that and mindful of that and apply the antidotes that we talked about. So far we talked about the antidotes to anger, and that can stop the afflictive emotion from leading to the harmful action. Now, the misperception is a little harder to catch. The way in which we apply antidotes to stop the ignorance and the misperception is through developing a view of emptiness or a view of dependent arising, of seeing things, how things actually exist, which is the wisdom that is opposite to the ignorance. So the more we can get familiar with this experience and this view of how the world actually exists as interconnected, as a dependent arising, then the less we're going to create this misperception that somehow we have to get things or we have to push things away in order for us to be happy. Okay, that misperception won't arise if we see things correctly as impermanent is one way, and the other way is empty of existing in the way that they appear. So they appear to exist independently, separately, separate from their causes and conditions, as well as separate from a mind that is perceiving them. And so by meditating on emptiness, we can start to shift that perception and see that things are not so concretely, externally real, that they are more like an illusion or more like a dream. Okay, so let's see what the next slide looks like. So emptiness, dependent arising, nothing exists independently, okay? Everything is dependent on anything else. So we talked about the fact that if things existed independently from my mind, then we would have to be able to find within those things something that says what they are, okay? If nothing came from my mind, then this cup would have to have cupness in it somewhere. And what we found, or the song that we talked about in terms of the CD, how do we know it's a song? Okay, it's a combination, a dependent arising of all the causes and conditions that went into the making of the music, as well as my mind labeling it. So because things exist dependently, they have no absolute reality or inherent existence on their own, without a mind, without other causes and conditions. And mind is one of the causes of those existent things. A consciousness has to be present in order for anything to exist as what it is. And sometimes we say, oh, well, there are cups, and even if there's no one there to observe the cup is still there. Okay, we often think that. But in fact, consciousness had to have been present in order for the making of the cup to have happened. And then we can say, well, and I talked about the fact that there has to be a valid basis in order to label it cup. In order for my mind to say that this a cup is a cup, it has to be able to function as a cup. I have to be able to drink out of it. Okay, so so then some could say, well, then this, whatever we call it, even if you don't call it anything, still exists separate from the mind. But if you start to look more closely at what you say this is, you start to see that even at the level of particles, at the level of what it's made of, that too is empty of existing in any way without consciousness being present. So we can go deeper and deeper in our analysis and start to see how important consciousness is to the existence of anything in the universe. Okay. And then we talked about that things are empty of existing in the way that they appear to us because our perceptions are filled with ignorance. They appear in a certain way, and so we are fooled. And when we recognize that they are empty of existing in that way, things become less solid, like an illusion or like a dream. So then our interaction with them becomes lighter. We can let them go more easily. We are not as overwhelmed by situations because we see that they are barely there and that they are constantly changing. And then we're light. When we're lighter, there's room for flexibility in our point of view, in our, for things to change. Sometimes if we get so focused on something and so committed to it being a certain way, then it isn't allowed to change. We can't see hope, we can't see perspectives, and it creates a lot of suffering because things are going to eventually change anyway, no matter what we think of them. It's the nature of it. And because our mind participates in our reality, when we change our mind, we change our reality. So the more that we can start to see things as constantly changing, see things as dependent arisings connected to causes and conditions, the more that we can start to influence those things, those causes and conditions, the more that we can see perspectives, ways in which to influence things that become more positive for our lives and for those we love. Okay. So now I wanted to move into another topic. So we haven't done a lot of with this. We did the 4 measurables a few days back, but I want to revisit on this last day this concept of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is it's an aspiration, it's a wish. So it's also a motivation and it's an intention. So it takes the wisdom and it becomes sort of makes it more real. So we've talked a lot about this idea of our interconnectedness with other beings, and we did a meditation on how our bodies are not really our bodies. This idea of my body is like an illusion. When I start labeling this my body, and I make it somehow separate, And then I start looking at, well, it depended on my parents. It depended on my parents' parents. It depended on, the hospital and all the people that went into the hospital. That whole meditation we did yesterday just starts to break up this idea of my body. So that taking this idea of interconnectedness of all those beings that I am connected with um, in order to exist, then I start to see that it makes sense that if I want to be happy, they need to be happy too, because there's no such thing as my happiness that is somehow separate from the happiness of others. So then expanding my love and my compassion outside of this, small self into a bigger, interconnectedness, even beyond just my family and friends, is actually more in line with reality, with how things exist. And it actually brings more joy. It brings more happiness to my mind because it is more in line with how things exist. So let's look at this aspiration, this bodhicitta aspiration. So it's got these different aspects, okay? The first aspect of bodhicitta is this warm heart. So you all know what this feels like. You've felt it, I'm sure, for, your children or your friends, your partner or your parents. Just feeling, a feeling of caring, a feeling of wanting to be kind, of joy when you interact with them or look at them, okay? So this is that warm heart. And then the second aspect of it is that it's a wish for others to have ultimate satisfaction, to have lasting happiness, not just the temporary happiness that comes from sense pleasure. And the third aspect is that it recognizes that all beings have this potential for wholeness, or what we call the Buddha nature, or a basic goodness. That all sentient beings, any being that has a mind, has the ability to grow and develop and become, fully awakened like a Buddha. And then the fourth aspect is the commitment to develop ourselves for others. So, in order for me to bring that ultimate satisfaction, to help others realize their potential, then I need to develop myself. I need to be able to know where I'm going in order to lead others to that same place. So, bodhicitta becomes this aspiration, this wish that I may become enlightened as the best person that I can become in order to be of greatest benefit to others. And when we start talking on a more Buddhist perspective, we talk about even the possibility of completely removing all negative emotions from our mind streams, so that we can expand that mind to limitlessly, to be available, to be spontaneously responding to wherever sentient beings have a need, and create the karma to be benefited, to change their minds, to move toward their own awakening. Then I can be available for that. And that's what a Buddha is. Okay, a Buddha is always available. It's like they often use the analogy of that we're all like flowers. Okay, I like that, thinking of myself as a flower, right? And Buddhas are like the sun. Okay, so the sun is always shining, but we have to turn our face to the sun to receive the blessings, to receive the sunlight, to receive the warmth. Okay, so that's the relationship between us and Buddhas. Now, Buddhas don't have, they aren't all powerful. Okay, they can't do anything that they want. Okay, because of this karma, right? Because we have created the causes, we still have, we've perpetuated the ignorance in our mind streams. We've created the causes to have blocks to their intervention. So if they could, because they have infinite kindness and infinite love and compassion for us, if they could, they would totally remove our suffering immediately, right? If they had that power, they would remove it, but they don't. Okay, so we have a responsibility to work on ourselves, to open our minds, to, you know, do our dharma practices, to work on our minds in our difficult situations, and then that creates the causes for those teachers to come into our lives, for us to, you know, get greater insights into whatever it is we're studying. So it's a matter of this interdependence, and that Buddhas aren't, they're very powerful, but they aren't all powerful. So it's up to us. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at bodhicitta. So we want to develop this. All right. Let me say one more thing about that. So we want to develop this aspiration, this wish, and this wish makes our lives very meaningful because it becomes our intention for everything that we do. When we're cooking a meal for ourselves or for our family, we're doing it with this idea that I am not only feeding myself and others, but I am doing it so that I can become enlightened, so that I can bring all beings ultimate happiness. So it becomes my underlying meaning and purpose in life is to be able to benefit others. And even if, like, I work in a box factory, so there's this great book by a man who interviewed His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So it's The Art of Happiness at Work, and it talks about, you know, he interviews people who even do very mundane, you know, jobs, and how they bring meaning into their work, even if, you know, what they're doing is not particularly interesting. But because of the relationships they have with other people, because of their connection to how their work benefits others in a greater sense, then they bring more joy, they bring more inspiration to their work. And we can do this with bodhicitta. Now, we have a tendency to be more self-focused because, of course, the self is a lot closer, right? My body is right here. And when you get stuck with a pin, I don't feel your suffering. When I get stuck with a pin, I feel it, right? So your suffering and your happiness is a little bit further away from me. So bodhicitta is the process of starting to expand that idea so that your happiness becomes as important to me as it is to you. And the removal of your suffering is as important to me as it is to you. Okay, so it starts to blur those lines between self and other. Now, one of the ways that we can start to do this, that we can start to shift this, is through looking at the disadvantages of being only focused on ourselves, of, you know, having this view of a self that is separate and that needs to look out for number one, that contraction that we talked about when we were talking about the four immeasurables, this idea that self-preservation is the best way to be. Okay, so starting to see how that really doesn't help anyone. And then on the opposite side, looking at the advantages, the positive aspects of expanding that love, of looking out for others. And one of the things that they talk about is, and we're not saying that you don't have any happiness, okay? We're not saying, because sometimes we're reinforced, if we're already very kind people, sometimes we're reinforced to put others so much ahead of ourselves that we don't even take care of our own basic needs. And that isn't what I'm talking about with bodhicitta, because in order for me to be able to be of benefit to others, I have to have something, right? I can't be starving and cold and miserable and, you know, like that. Then I'm of no benefit to anybody. And sometimes in helping professions, you know, when people do that, are reinforce themselves and are reinforced to put everybody else's needs before their own, then they burn out very quickly. They get very upset, and they go back to only thinking about me, and they think that's the only way to be. Okay, so I had one really wonderful student who talked about this idea of, when my cup is full, when I fill my cup, then it overflows, right, for everybody. And that should be more the attitude that we have, rather than this idea of everybody goes first, I'm nothing. Okay, because that doesn't work either. Okay, so we often talk about self-compassion. Okay, but it's hard, isn't it? Because we have to have this wisdom that sees when we have enough and when we need to share, when we need to, open to others. And what I found is that what I actually need has started, as I have started to see how wonderful it is to focus on others, how wonderful it is to give away to others once I have enough, that what I actually need becomes much smaller and much simpler. And I'm happy with giving. I get so much more happiness with giving than I do with getting. And so it's an interesting shift that happens. So let's look at some ways we can start to shift this, seeing this self-centeredness as more disadvantageous than cherishing others. So some aspects of this self-centeredness are that we end up harming others. So if I'm only thinking about myself and I'm not thinking about anybody else, I end up ignoring others. I end up taking from others, thinking that I deserve it more than they do, and that harms others. I get easily offended. So like, if I expect others to always take care of me, to always be nice to me, to always look out for me, then when they don't, I think, oh, that's awful. And, people treat me so bad. And, and even really small things, like not opening the door for me, or not leaving me the last piece of cake or something like that. I start getting all upset about that. Instead of, if I were, rejoicing in everybody having cake, it becomes a different point of view. Okay. It creates a lot of fear. When I'm only focused on what I get, then I'm all worried and upset at getting what I need. Okay. So like, there was a time, it was kind of embarrassing when I think about it now, but I was going to be in a retreat, right? And I wanted a certain seat in the retreat, right? And so I went in there really early, and I put my stuff on on this certain cushion in the retreat hall, and then I like left, right? And then I was all worried that people were going to move my stuff and take my seat, right? And it was so ridiculous. And yet I get so, when we really are attached to something and we're so focused on ourselves, it creates this fear of losing it. Okay. It's also the root of dissatisfaction. If I am only worried about myself, then there's no way to fill this pit, right? If I constantly want more and more and more and more, then it's this never being content, never having gratitude. Okay. And then it creates a lot of conflict with others when I'm only looking out for me. It creates conflict with countries, cities, I mean, villages, families. It's conflict on every level. Um, and is the start of wars. Whereas dialogue, when we can start to try to find win-win situations for everybody, decreases that conflict. And that comes from starting to cherish others as much as ourselves. And of course, it blocks spiritual progress. So some of the disadvantages then some of the advantages then of cherishing others is that all beings are happy. I'm happy and you're happy. We create a meaningful life. Okay, like was just talking about this bodhicitta motivation. that our lives become more meaningful because we're more focused on how we can help others, how we can benefit others. Sometimes people go into the helping professions because it's more meaningful than being in some kind of a rat race. But you know, in some kind of a corporate setting where you're having to step on other people's toes in order to exist. And they give that up and they go to something that they consider more meaningful, okay? Because it benefits others. But like I said, you can benefit others. You can have a bodhicitta motivation in any kind of work, in any kind of setting. You can be happy anywhere because you're not worried about how other people are treating you. You're worried about how you're treating others, about making others happy. And then you have healthier relationships too, because you're better able to see other people's points of view and what they want from you. Okay. And then your relationships are happier and healthier because you can give that to them. Right. And usually, if you are focusing on what they want, they feel more relaxed and open to focus on what you want. So that interchange becomes much easier. Okay. When you have this attitude of cherishing others, harmony increases overall and you create positive karma. Okay. So you can see that this idea of decreasing that only me attitude, that contraction, and increasing this openness and this giving and this even beyond, like I said, beyond our own people, you know, beyond our own friends and family, but even, you know, strangers. And I had a really nice teaching from my main teacher this morning, and he was talking about how prayers and dedications can have, you know, because of our pure intention and because of, you know, interdependence, that they can have an effect in the world, that we aren't completely helpless in this situation, that even though this you know, virus and this pandemic feels very out of control, and there are definitely certain aspects that we can't change, that we have to accept that it exists and it's going on in our world, through our prayers and through our dedications, we can actually mitigate the effects. Mitigate means that we can stop it from being as bad as it could be. Okay, so if no one was praying and no one was having positive thoughts and sending out positive intentions for, you know, to support the healthcare workers, to, you know, help you know, the people to cope with staying in, you know, in isolation, you know, to help the governments that are trying to you know, deal with the situation. If those good intentions weren't there, then then things could be really a lot worse. It could spread a lot further. It could, a lot more people could die. So it is by having our positive intention that we can actually help it not be so bad. Okay, even from this, you know, we're all alone in our little room and it looks like we're only benefiting ourselves. It actually, you know, it spreads, and it does. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we develop this bodhicitta attitude? And one of the ways, and we're going to do this meditation today, is how we train our minds. So we train our minds through a meditation called Tonglen. Now, Tonglen is the Tibetan for it. Tong means giving and Len means taking. So the first thing that we do is we imagine a person. So usually we start with someone who it's easy to imagine, like someone who we already care about, like a mother or a friend or something like that. And then we imagine that we are taking away their suffering. And um, Felipe is going to go into this, and he has a nice picture too. I'm looking forward to seeing it. How we imagine taking away their suffering. And then we take it into our hearts. We become willing to take on their suffering, which is an act of, that is opposite to self-centeredness, okay? Which is an act of valuing others. We become willing to take on the suffering ourselves. Now, when it comes into us, we don't want it to make us sick or make us, negative in any way. So what happens is that when it comes into our hearts, we transform it from its darkness, from its suffering, into light. And there's different ways we can do this. One way we can do it is we can imagine that there's this shell, this hard shell of self-centeredness that is around our good nature, our basic goodness, our loving heart. And that when that suffering comes into us, it breaks that shell up. It kind of explodes it. And what is left is this love and this light. So then we send out love. So that's the giving part. We send out everything that that person who we've imagined in front of us needs, all the support, all the basic needs, all the kind words, all the relief, whatever it is they may need, all the healing, all the company, whatever they need to be happy, the wisdom, all those things for their ultimate happiness. And then we do the process again. We repeat it for ourselves. So we can imagine ourselves when we are in a future time when we're going to be suffering, or in a past time when we were children and we went through a difficult time. And we can imagine same thing, taking away the suffering, transforming it, getting rid of our self-centeredness, and giving, sending love. Okay. So this process of Tonglen is not about actually affecting someone else. Its purpose is to train our minds to become more used to an attitude of compassion, taking suffering, doing whatever we can to remove the suffering, and an attitude of love that is giving happiness to others. And eventually we do this, we put it on the breath. So we breathe in all the suffering in the world, and we breathe out every possible giving that we can give. Okay. And that starts to shift our minds from a focus on me, to others, compassion and loving kindness. Okay. If you wanted to ask some questions, we have some time now for questions.
I am going to start by unmuting Ginger. You can now ask your question.
Yes, my connection's a bit funky. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the question I have, I just want to give a little background. Like, I come from a family of abuse and violence, and then I've spent most of my life in the caregiving professions, and now I'm at a time of trying to recover from burnout. And so I get caught up often when we get into this point of the prayers where, like, so long as suffering remains, I too would like to remain. And I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm okay with being here this life and doing what I can, but I'm also like really eager to let the suffering end. Including, to not be, myself suffering. So part of that's like not so much fear of death, more fear of suffering, but also wondering how to like revive that feeling of bodhicitta that I've had so much in my life of, being in service to many, many people. And now I'm just like, I don't think I have it left in me anymore. So how can, the question is like, what kind of practice can help me revive that without, and still be filling my cup?
Yeah. So the burnout that came was the result of, did you get sick, or did you, like physically, did you burn out, or did you feel that you weren't making any difference and it was like you were hitting a like a wall? Or what were some of the things that led to the burnout?
It's more physical and mental of myself. My work is very successful, and I help a lot of people, and I have a lot of clients. And I've taken a sabbatical to stop working so that I can get healthy, and I find it challenging to take care of myself.
Okay. So it's because the need is so great, you feel like you have to constantly give even beyond your levels of your energy and your levels of your positive emotional state. And then is that correct? And then
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then as a result, go ahead.
Part of it's, you know, working is like you kind of have to work. So then there's the survival aspect. But, you know, I will easily get lost in my work, and then, you know, helping clients get to the end of the day and just be too exhausted to cook myself good food. Like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I all felt great, but until I have to come back to myself.
Yeah. And so in some ways there's the practical aspects of that we are limited human beings, and there's only so much that we can give to others. And I understand, especially if you're working for an institution, because I ran into this too when I was practicing as a therapist, that their demands are so high that you can't, it's not the option that you back off. Is your private practice, or is it with a company?
A private
practice. Okay.
Yeah.
So in some ways you have more flexibility, that you could work half days.
Yeah, I did that, and now I've taken a full sabbatical because my health is demanding.
Okay. Okay. So so my first response was self-compassion. Okay. Doing practices of self-compassion, where you are, instead of being judgmental, you know, the self-talk that is judgmental, that I can't do enough, I'm not doing enough, to kindness, that rejoicing in what you can do. Okay, that this is enough, that this is my limit, and that's okay, I can do enough. And then the other, yeah. So I think that, and an acceptance of our limits. Sometimes, you know, we have to just accept our limits. And for me, one of the things I had to do, maybe this relates to you, was I had to, that was the other one. I had to start to recognize when I was giving too much, when I had to give less, and be rest, kick back, relax, and that was okay. That is actually as beneficial for others as it is for me. That I am serving others by taking care of myself, so I can live to serve another day, kind of thing. Okay, so that was the other thing. And then the other one that sometimes gets us is this this belief in the concreteness of things that makes them so heavy, you know, like other people, and oftentimes, especially if there's a lot of need, people see their own needs as so urgent and important. And then we get caught up in that. We get caught up in that every need is urgent and important. Our bosses, our clients, you know, our coworkers, and then we start to get into that attitude. And when in fact, when you have this view of emptiness, you have this view of impermanence, that the nature of everything is changing. It is so much lighter than we get caught into. And if we can learn to have that attitude whenever we approach anyone and try to hold on to it when we're with those people, you know, then it's much easier for them to start to relax about it. We can relax about it, they can relax about it, and then we don't get, you know, that takes a lot of energy too. It's so important. This report absolutely has to be done, and it has to be done perfectly because we have the auditors, and then, the insurance companies, and, all that kind of stuff. And I just think that we don't have to have that urgency. Not that we do bad work. It's more like a lightness, an attitude of, it's fine. It's okay. This is enough. I am enough. Like Brené Brown says.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, it is helpful. And I wanted to, like, what would you, my resistance to staying forever, that resistance to suffering. I know you, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to take more time because we haven't talked about selflessness yet. And we haven't talked about reincarnation and what goes from life to life. And I think that this concrete sense of self that is going to continue to suffer forever is actually not correct view. When we start talking about what goes from life to life and how we actually exist, then it isn't like this me or this I that I am feeling right now that is going to suffer. And though both of those things are so less absolute than we experience them to be, because I agree, like I don't want to be sick forever. I don't want to feel everybody's, pain forever. But then what is that I that I'm talking about? Where is that I that I somehow think is going to suffer? And if I start breaking up that sense of I, that absolute sense of I, then who am I really talking about that is suffering? Right? Where is that concrete sense of self? And we just haven't gotten to that yet. So you have to come back for the next course.
I will.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we're gonna move on to Eleanor. 1 second, Eleanor. There we go. You're now muted. You can ask your question.
Eleanor?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. It's lovely to
Hi.
see you. Hi.
You too.
I don't really have a question per se, but I've been thinking a lot that my whole life has been a life of giving to others. I have a nursing background in palliative terminal cares with children and adults, and I think for me, it is so much harder for me to receive than it is to give. I find it so easy to give, and yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that really. And I think that's quite common for a lot of women who are in professions, where they do give a lot, so I just wanted to wonder what I could do around that, to become a lot more gracious in my acceptance of assistance from others. And I'm going to need it more and more, as I'm aging, because my mobility is not what it anyway. I don't want to babble on.
Okay, so it cut out towards the end, but I think I got most of it. So being gracious in receiving, being more comfortable with accepting help, because you have, you've given for a long time, and it is difficult. And I think what stops us from being gracious in receiving is this sense of independence, that if I am not independent, then people will either feel like they are a burden to me, that I'm a burden to them, or that I am somehow not okay if I have to rely on others, that I'm a bad person. I'm not taking care of myself the way I should if I have to rely on others. And starting to get used to the fact that we already rely on others in everything, you know,
Yeah.
like our lights and our house and our clothes and our, you know, we're already in that attitude of accepting and giving. And if we can start to, you know, develop gratitude for what we are already receiving. Another thing that I have done is that I have gotten better at allowing people to give to me, because I know it's such a good thing for them. It's really for people to be able to take care of me. It brings them a lot of joy. You know,
Yeah.
it brings them good karma. It, you know, so that's another thing, through gratitude of, you know, being happy when people give to you, and celebrating that. And then, you know, and of course you're thankful, and yeah, and then there's sometimes this attitude of I don't deserve it. Sometimes I have that view. I don't know if that's true for you, that somehow I don't deserve people to take care of me or to give to me because I'm not okay in myself. And so I don't know if that's true for you, but that would be something else to work on. But that in fact, there's no such thing as a bad person. You know, there are bad actions, but there are no bad people. There are no, you know, yeah, unacceptable people. There's no one that doesn't deserve love and kindness from others. It just doesn't exist. And it's our own ignorance that makes us believe that.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank
Good.
you.
All right, so we move on to Anusha. Can I ask a question now?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi. So my question is, when we are practicing Bodhisattva, like people may not realize that, like, you know, we are being kind to them, and then it makes it more difficult to like to be more giving, and you know, like,
So
and
people don't realize that we are being kind to them. So it makes it more difficult for us to continue to be kind to them.
yes, like, so my question is, like, how do we like keep generating that kindness, like, so that, like, we don't wear out.
Okay. So we talked about loving kindness in terms of wanting others to be happy without expecting anything in return. So then the reinforcement or the encouragement to continue to be kind, even when we don't get anything in return, comes from focusing on the feeling that we get in our hearts simply from giving, simply from loving, simply from creating happiness for others, no matter if they respond, you know, give us back or not. If they don't say thank you, we still know that what we did was a positive action, and that it was positive for us. We had a pure intention. It was positive for them. But we don't have this expectation that they're going to give us something in return. But you have to get used to that. It is difficult. It's a challenging situation. So focusing on the joy that it brings you to give, instead of focusing on the pleasure you might receive when someone says thank you.
Yeah, but like, what if they are not benefiting from what we are, like, you know, from our kindness, and they don't,
Okay.
yeah, they don't realize our help, and then even they are suffering, and then, like, so even I'm suffering because like whatever the help I did, like, is not being helpful to them.
Okay. So if they aren't getting anything out of what you're doing to help them, are you really helping them?
Well, like, well, we do what we know the best, right? So, and then, like, few people might be stubborn, like, to take help even though they know it will be useful for them.
Yeah, well, sometimes we think we know better than others, and we don't necessarily. Sometimes we think, oh, this is really what you need, and this is how you need to be, and this is what's really going to make you happy. But from their point of view, it's not. And so then we have to be kind to them and find out, is this helpful for you? What do you want me to do? And if they're not ready for the kind of support that you believe they should have, then you're giving it to them. They are going to reject it. They are going to be stubborn. And you're not going to benefit anyone. You're going to make yourself upset and you're going to make them upset. So being more like communicating more about what they actually want from you and what they can, you know, what they can handle. I mean, when you're a parent and a child and the child is young, I think that's a little bit different situation. But if you're talking about people who are equal, you know, that are your peers, then communicating about it is much better. You save yourself a lot of frustration.
Okay, thank you.
Should
Sure.
we do one more?
Yeah, sure. One more. What do we use? Yeah, one more.
Okay. We have Sarfaraz with a question.
Good morning, Venerable. I truly
Hi.
hope you're doing well. So my question is, if nothing exists independently and is a dependent arising, then how is the mind a dependent arising? Mind is also described as beginningless. And dependent arising implies causation. And if mind also had causes and conditions to exist, how would it be beginningless? Also, if some factors, conditions, causes did cause mind to exist, what could some of them probably be? Thank you.
Okay. So we talk about this moment of mind being caused by a previous moment of mind. And the previous moment of mind is an effect of a cause of a previous moment of mind. So remember, mind has lots of layers and lots of aspects. And so in order for my mind, which is this huge thing right now, you know, of this moment, in order for it to be what it is, as far as having the knowledge, having the, you know, the functions of discrimination, of feeling, of all these things, then there were lots of causes and conditions that went into this mind of this moment. All the experiences that I had, all the learning that I did, all the karmic seeds that I planted, all the other, you know, people that I interacted with. All of these things are causes and conditions that come into the mind of this moment. Now, if we talk about the primary cause, like when we talk about the seed that becomes the sprout, okay, the primary cause of the mind, the seed that becomes the sprout, is that previous moment of consciousness that is a cause for the next moment of consciousness in time. And that has always been going on. There has never been a time in which that cause and effect process began, or never a time when it didn't exist. So it's always been happening. So the causes of this mind are always perpetuating themselves and will continue. So it's kind of hard to grasp, but you can see the primary cause is existent within the mind itself. And then all the other aspects of the mind are all the conditions that go into what I am conscious of, right? I have consciousness and then what I am conscious of. And those are all different, you know, that's like all the experiences I've ever had.
Right. So I think, okay, this is a bit of a, you know, egg and chicken problem, where we try to determine the causality of let's say, so if it has always been going on, then there needs to be a point somewhere where it started. Otherwise, how could it exist today? Like, that's how everything that exists, you know, follows the rule of causation. Like, something has to be there, but there has to be something that was always there, and that's why we believe in the beginningless mind. Because if it was not from, you know, if it has a starting, then who made that? And then again the cycle continues. So
Right.
but when we study causality in research methodology, we believe that like true causality cannot be ascertained. However, a probabilistic causality, that there are different calculations that can be done to ascertain that. For example, Clive Granger, using his causality, Clive Granger hypothesis test, people ascertained that egg came first. So we can say that like eggs Granger cause hen. Like we can't straightforward say that eggs cause hen, but we can say eggs Granger cause hen. So has there any attempt made to, because how mind is like not as sometimes not as objective as mathematics can be. So has any attempt been made in that field where people the concept of causality as a theoretical concept?
Yes. I have not studied it super extensively, but they do in the monasteries. They go more deeply into this concept of causality. And so someone who is more educated than me, like what we call a geshe, could talk more about how causality functions, how they've evaluated it, and how it works on that philosophical level. Yeah. So where can you look at that? Where? Yeah. All I can say is start. I guess Tibet House maybe. You could start studying there. You'd have to, take a course with a geshe to go into the depths of this. But it sounds like a really, it would be very positive to have a conversation with someone who has studied Tibetan Buddhism and causality from that point of view and bring into it the scientific perspective that you're talking about.
Right. Can I follow up a bit more?
We don't really have time.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay.
We have
I
to do the meditation. All right. Thank you.
I
Thank you for your
understand.
question. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for
Uh-huh.
your answer.
All right. So shall I show the image? Can you see it? Okay. So Venerable Drolma, maybe you can help me out explaining the process. Right. So the reason I put together this this image is because sometimes people get confused in terms of how to practice, because we'll do it also for ourselves. So you have on one end, the first step is to visualize yourself, yeah, and then another person. But we will start. This other person will be also yourself, as Venerable Drolma mentioned. Perhaps a future self or a past self, somebody who you give love to, perhaps yourself as a child, and then we visualize in ourselves this rock, this very dark matter that Venerable Drolma talked about, being this self-centeredness, this self-cherishing attitude. And then on the other person, we visualize this dark smoke which is surrounding them, and it symbolizes their problems, their suffering, basically. And so in the second step, you visualize inhaling this dark smoke, but you bring it not into yourself, but rather into this dark shell that surrounds your heart. And basically this smoke begins to harm and destroy eventually this dark shell. And that brings us to the last step, which is that this dark shell being destroyed, it uncovers our utmost potential for goodness and for wisdom, compassion, and loving kindness. And this manifests in a form of light shining from your heart. And then you can, with the out breath, give and shine this light upon the other person and grant them all their happiness. So we start by removing all the suffering and giving all the happiness. So hopefully that helps out, that's clear. because as I said, it's easy when you do it with another person completely different, but we'll start doing it for ourselves. So hopefully that will make it easier to visualize. Yeah. So let's get started then with a meditation. Let's start by going into a comfortable position. Bring yourself to a relaxed state and allow your body to become stable and grounded. Allowing the bell to bring you into the space of the body. Taking a moment to settle down. Allowing the body and the awareness to become grounded and stable. Taking a moment to connect with the space of the body and taking deep breaths to relax and calm down. Bringing back this experience of your body settle down in its natural state. Simply allow it to rest. Now, letting go of observing the body, moving on to the space of the mind, where thoughts, mental images arise. As a preparation for the meditation, spend some time contemplating on the following points. All beings want to be happy. They have basic needs, such as the need for food, shelter, being comfortable, feeling safe and loved. They also have things that they wish for, such as friends, possessions, a satisfying job, and so forth. And all beings also wish to be free of every kind of pain and problem. Going into your heart, get in touch with these basic feelings that we share with everyone else. Recognize that everything that you do in your life is motivated by the wish to be happy and to avoid problems. And the same is true for all other beings. Don't feel that there's anything wrong with feeling this way. We all deserve to be happy and free from pain. So ask yourself, if we are all the same in wanting to be peaceful, happy, and satisfied, and we don't want to experience any unhappiness, pain, or problems, then is it actually right for me to care only for my happiness, about my problems? And check what is the result of such a self-centered attitude. Does it bring you the happiness that you want? Does it prevent you from experiencing the problems that you don't want? So trying to recognize that this self-centeredness is counterproductive. Try to give rise to the wish to become less focused on yourself and more loving and caring towards others. It is possible to transform your mind in this way. And one method that can help is definitely the meditation of Tonglen. So we start by visualizing at the center of your heart this self-centeredness manifested in the shape of a dark, hard rock. And also visualized in front of you another version of yourself, perhaps in the past or in the future. Knowing that you experience suffering in many ways, in many degrees. You can see this version of yourself surrounded by a dark black smoke. And this dark smoke represents the suffering that you have to undergo. And knowing how it feels like to suffer, how it's something that you want to get rid of, you can give rise to the mind of compassion, thinking how wonderful it would be if I would be free of all the suffering that it causes. Taking it upon yourself as you breathe in deeply. Bring this dark smoke to the center of the heart where this self-centered attitude is present, this dark rock. The smoke gradually harms this self-centeredness until it destroys it. Breathing in with compassion, taking the suffering, getting rid of the self-centeredness within your heart. With every in-breath wishing, may I be free of suffering. And at one point, both the self-centeredness and the dark smoke completely dissolve and disappear. The rock explodes and dissolves completely. This uncovers your potential for love, for wisdom. It uncovers underneath this white light shining from your heart, which we can imbue with the wish of loving kindness. Giving rise to this mind by simply thinking, may you be free, may you have all the happiness and with the out-breath, as you exhale with loving kindness, sharing this light with the person in front of you, which is just a version of yourself. Breathing out, wishing, may you be happy. And imagine that this version of yourself is now free from all the suffering and has gained all the happiness. So feel the joy. Be happy that you had the possibility to do this. And gently allow this image of yourself to dissolve. Now visualize that in front of you, another person appears. This time you have the image of a loved one, perhaps a family member, a partner, a friend, somebody who you know and cherish. Knowing them, you are aware that they have suffering in their lives. You know that they experience difficulties. So once again, imagine the suffering of this person, of this loved one, in the form of this dark smoke surrounding them. And again, visualizing self-centeredness in your heart as a dark rock, giving rise to the mind of compassion, inhaling that smoke with compassion, wishing, may you be free of all your sufferings, free of all your pain, free of anything that causes you to suffer. Breathing in, bringing that suffering to destroy the self-centered attitude within you. And then this rock of self-centeredness gets destroyed, completely obliterated. And the suffering surrounding the person disappears. And now all that is left within your heart is your highest potential. So with the wish of loving kindness, share this light from within. Exhaling with loving kindness, Allow this light to transform into whatever the person in front of you needs to be happy. Every single time you exhale, wishing, may you be happy. May you be loved. May you be peaceful. And having granted all the happiness that this person wishes for and deserves, feeling the joy within yourself and looking at them, happy and joyful themselves. Gently allow them to dissolve. This time, in front of you, bring up the image of a stranger, a person that you may not know very well, somebody who you may not have contact with regularly. And yet you know that it's simply another human being who experiences suffering as well. So once again, going through the whole process, breathing in with compassion, breathing out with loving kindness. Take upon yourself, and especially this self-centeredness, the suffering of the other person, getting rid of the self-centeredness within yourself, wishing, may you be free of suffering. And then once the rock has once again disappeared and the suffering of the person has disappeared, breathing out with loving kindness, sharing this light from within, wishing, may you be happy, may you be peaceful, loved, and have all good things happening in your life. Visualize the light from your heart transforming into whatever the person needs to be happy. Once they become satisfied, once again feel the joy of having done this act of loving kindness and compassion, and allow them to dissolve. keeping within your heart this joyful feeling. Becoming aware of your surroundings once again. Now we go into the dedication. As usual, reading from Shantideva's prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by suffering of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective, and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of war. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. Oh, there's someone asking me to share the image of Tonglang. I'll share it now in the chat. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank you all for being in this session. And just to reinforce a tiny bit what our lovely director said in the beginning of the session, we really do appreciate any opportunity that you have for practicing generosity. And you know, there's no offering that is too small. So if you find the teachings beneficial, if you found this course beneficial, we would really also benefit from your acts of generosity. So thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Venerable Drolma, for having taught us in this time. And I'm really excited to move forward with these teachings and these sessions.
Yes, thank you, Felipe. So we start next week on Monday. So you have 2 days off, and we'll start on Monday at the same time. And we'll be doing some additional topics that we didn't get to, and going a little deeper into a few of those ones that we did get to. So please come back. We'll do 2 more weeks, and yeah, thank you.
Venerable Drolma, should we share the presentation here in the chat? There's some people who are asking for it now, the PowerPoint.
Do you want me to? We can. I can.
Yep. Can you post it on the chat? Then
Yeah,
I'll.
You have to let me see everybody.
Oh, that's a
Like
good.
chat to everybody, because remember you have it on only private.
Yes, I can. Everyone publicly. There you go.
All
I
right.
think that should work.
So there's everyone, and now the file. It is on my computer.
You don't need to register again. The same Zoom link would work for those people asking right now. The name of this meditation is Tonglen.
And Who was the gentleman who was asking about the cause and effect? I would like to put him in touch with maybe a Geshe.
Sarfaraz.
Can you write his, well, do you have his name so after class I can get it from you?
Yep.
Or if he wants to share his email with me, I could do it from email.
I think he disconnected. He's he's no longer in session. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's the PowerPoint if you want to download it.
And one more thing, everyone. So usually during the Introduction to Buddhism courses, we show a movie of a teaching. So we have a short movie day, which for the weekend, since we have no class, will be into space. So I will upload a couple of teachings and videos. So you're welcome to join. Probably it'll be on a different schedule than the classes we usually do. But just pay attention to the Facebook page and to Shita Meditation Center so that you can maybe join the watch party of the teaching.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.